my YouTube channel. My name is Allison Clarke and I'm a senior portrait and wedding photographer based out of Southern New Hampshire, and I'm also an educator for those who are just starting their own photography businesses and want to learn a little bit more. Today I am answering one of my most frequently asked questions, which is how I get my images so sharp. And this is kind of a two-part answer, so I'm going to be sharing with you guys two big things. And these are things that I've kind of touched on in previous videos, but I'm going to be diving a little bit more in depth today so that you guys can have a full understanding of how I get my images so crisp and sharp every time. So the first tip has to do with Aperture. And if you don't know what Aperture is, I will link a video in the description below that I made a little while back that kind of goes over the Aperture basics. So if you don't know what Aperture is, pause this video and go check out that one. You should definitely master that and have a full understanding of it before you finish off this video. But if you do know what Aperture is, you should know that I keep my Aperture, whether it be a senior session or a couple session or a wedding or engagement, whatever it is, unless it's a really huge group that kind of has multi-layers, I pretty much keep my Aperture around 2.5 or 2.8. This ensures that my aperture is wide enough and therefore my depth of field is shallow enough that my background is out of focus, but my entire subject is still totally sharp. I like to use a longer lens, like an 85mm also, and I like to kind of separate my subject from the background as much as I can so that my background is still super silky and creamy and soft, but my subject is still totally sharp and in focus. If you're using a lens like a 35mm and you have your subject right up against, I don't know, a flower bush or something, you're not going to see quite as much depth as you would if you were to use a longer lens and really separate your subject. So if you practice separating your subject using a longer lens but keeping your aperture around 2.5 or 2.8, you should be able to instantly see a difference where your subject's face is totally sharp and beautifully in focus, but your background is super silky and creamy. My second tip has to do with back button focusing. Again, I covered this briefly in a different video that I will link in the description below to make sure that you guys have a full understanding of this. But essentially, how I utilize back button focusing is I put my focus point, which you can see in the center of your viewfinder, over my subject's eye, and then I press the shutter button halfway down and then hold the back button to lock my focus in. I find that this is way faster and easier than trying to move around your focus point to make sure that it's over your subject and also that your composition is correct, because we don't want to have to worry about cropping and recomposing later in post-processing. It's way easier to put the subject or put the focus point over your subject's eye, lock in that focus, and then recompose. And it just basically ensures that your focus will stay locked over their eye, which if you're photographing a person, it's always important to focus on the eyes. So locking that focus in right over their eye and then recomposing before you fully press down your shutter. I find that people who don't use back button focusing, if they try to focus and recompose, sometimes their camera can kind of try to refocus. It doesn't quite lock in that focus the same way as back button focusing does. So definitely check out, I shoot Nikon, so I know exactly where my back button focus is, that I'd be happy to share, but if you shoot Sony or Canon, I couldn't quite tell you, but I'm sure that if you looked it up, you'd be able to find pretty easily where that back button is on your camera. But I always love kind of moving my focus point if I have to, but really just positioning it over their eye, holding the shutter half down, locking in that focus with the back button, and then recomposing to make sure that not only my subject is in focus, but that my composition is correct right off the bat. I won't have to do any adjustments later in post-processing. So those are my two major tips for sharper images. I hope this was super helpful. If it was, definitely leave a like. And if you have any further questions about either of these two things, drop them in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to answer them. If you have questions about other things that you'd like me to answer, again, leave those in the comments below. I'm always looking for new ideas for videos, and I want to make sure that I'm answering all of your questions and providing content that's truly helpful for you, so please don't hesitate to leave those in the comments. Additionally, if you are a photographer who has not yet snagged my free download, it is linked in the description below, so definitely go check that out. It is called Posing with Confidence, 6 Tips to Help You Slay Your Next Senior Session, and it is basically chock full of tips not only to help you level up your posing, but also help your seniors or just your subject in general feel more confident and comfortable in front of your camera and therefore more natural, which will only help improve your images and therefore your client experience. I could talk forever about the importance importance of posing, but I will let the guide do the talking, so definitely snag that if you haven't already. Make sure to follow me on Instagram as well at Allison Clarke Photography for more daily tips and tricks on my feed and my stories. I post there all the time and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have over DM. So definitely shoot me a follow on there as well. Again, that is all I have for you guys this week, but I will see you next Friday when my new video comes out, and have a great weekend.